I know that you've talked to a lot of people that talk about how motherly their mother was and how wonderful their mother was. And I think as I talk about her, you'll find out that I do think she was wonderful, but I feel as a young mother, she was not quite ready, and I think she would tell people. She told my grandmother one time, "I'm just not sure apple pie and motherhood is my thing."
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Daughter's Inheritance, where we have honest conversations with daughters about the complex relationships they have with their mom. In this episode, I'll be talking with Dr. Diana Eubanks, who is a clinical professor of veterinary medicine with a specialty in dentistry here at Mississippi State University. But I've known Diana for a while. I will say I was in my 20s when I moved to Atlanta, and we met shortly after that.
So we've known each other at least 10 years.
That's right. Yeah, at least, yes, that's something like that. So, and she grew up in Smyrna, Georgia. So if you're not familiar, that's just outside Atlanta. Went to the University of Georgia for undergrad and vet school. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for asking me, and let me just start by saying I think this is an amazing thing that you've been doing, so well done.
Thank you. Feel free to add in any other things about yourself as we go along. That was just a quick intro, but let's start with you telling me about your mom, who she was just as a woman before she was a wife and a mother, a little bit about her background, just so we can kind of frame who she was.
Okay, well, I was named for her, and perhaps a little bit too closely. My name is Diana with an A, and hers was Diane with an E, so that caused a lot of confusion as I was growing up. But she was born in 1943. She was raised by my grandmother and her stepfather. My grandmother's first marriage didn't last very long. And she grew up in a household with two half-siblings. She has a sister and a brother. She shared a room with her sister, and so that came with some of the normal sibling rivalry type of things. And she was very protective of her baby brother. Her baby brother was about 8 years younger than her, and I think that was a big thing in his life, was he had his sister die that looked after him. Mm-hmm. She went to secretarial school out of high school. She married my dad when she was 20. She had me when she was 21.
So she just took off, right?
She did. Yeah. She took off. I'm not sure she was quite ready for all of that. I know that you've talked to a lot of people that talk about how motherly their mother was and how wonderful their mother was. And I think as I talk about her, you'll find out that I do think she was wonderful, but I feel as a young mother, she was not quite ready, and I think she would tell people. She told my grandmother one time, "I'm just not sure apple pie and motherhood is my thing." But she made it work, and we became closer as she got older.
Actually, in one of the other episodes, somebody said, "My mother didn't know what she was doing. She was 22 years old, and she'd have told you, I don't know what I was doing." So I think that may be a common thing as well. You were also named for your father, right? So
I
you
was.
had
My
Diane
middle name
and
is Lee. Yes.
And so
they were either fairly original or unoriginal, however you want to say it.
One or the other. So what was the relationship that she had with her mother?
My grandmother she was a wonderful woman. She was a wonderful cook. She was a wonderful grandmother. She was a little bit of a stern woman. She wasn't exceptionally compassionate or nurturing. And I think, that probably shaped my mother a little bit. My mother was very independent, and I think she instilled that in me. I'm very independent, can kind of take care of myself kind of person. But she certainly didn't have that warm motherly figure.
Yeah, similar to her mother.
Right.
Ora May.
That's right.
I mean, you got to love that name.
Yes.
Ora May and Oscar.
Oscar. That's just, yes.
Yeah. And you had a great relationship with him, even though that wasn't her father.
I did. And I heard her say one time that growing up with two step siblings in a household with a stepfather, she always felt a little different. Some of that may have been what she created. Some of that, I think it just was different. And she didn't feel exceptionally close to him, but she said that where he maybe wasn't terribly successful as a father, he sort of made up for it as a grandfather because he was just, the sun rose and set on him when I was a child, and I think it was a mutual feeling there. He was a very influential person in my life.
Now, your grandmother was a great cook.
She was.
Your mother?
My mother was not, not at all. My dad traveled a lot, and Mom often did fish sticks, takeout, pizza. Yeah, and as she got older, she made no excuses for not liking to cook. She wanted a very fancy mixer, one of those KitchenAid fancy looking. She wanted that simply because it looked very good on her granite countertop. She never ever turned it on. It was never used, but she liked that. But she was not a good cook. My dad was, we'll get into that probably in a few minutes, but he could be a little critical too. So I don't blame her. Part of learning to cook in most cases is trial and error. And I remember one time she cooked some green beans and didn't string them, and you would have thought she was trying to serve cat food or something, the way my dad acted.
So he wasn't one of those that pretended like, oh, honey, that is so good.
No, not at all. And I grew up being, for some reason or other, very, very protective of her. And so I remember a few dinners I just about wanted to choke him and say, she's trying. And then you couldn't blame her for not trying again when there wasn't a lot of grace there for error.
So she had two step siblings.
She did.
And your father had, he was an only child.
He was an only child.
And you were an only child.
Correct.
So not a huge family.
Not at all. When I was small, we would often have my dad's parents over to my mother's parents' house for holidays. And I can't remember there ever being more than maybe 9 or 10 individuals there and that was with both sides of the family. So very small family. And as I've gotten older, that family's even smaller. Of her siblings, her sister did not have a child. Her brother had one child. So I really just have one amazing cousin.
Yeah.
And she also has one only child. So we're not a real proliferative family.
So what did your mom like to do? She didn't necessarily like to cook, but what brought her joy?
She did like to garden, and she passed that down to me. I think I take it a little level up. She mainly did little containers and stuff, and I love to do all kinds of yard work. I think her job brought her joy. She stayed at home with me when I was small, but by the time I was in first grade, I think she got a secretarial job. My dad was a typical man of the time and did not think that his wife should have to work. And I remember when she did go to work that he made her get a separate checking account. And all of her money was to go into that, and absolutely none of it was to be spent on any household items.
That was his responsibility.
That was. So he was very much the provider in that way. And I think the very first thing I remember her buying from her special checking account was a nice set of patio furniture. And I think it very much hurt his pride to actually even sit on the furniture at first. There was some battle with that. But I think she enjoyed getting out and doing that. Now, when I say getting out, she was not a real people person, or I get so many of my traits in that regard from her. Very introverted. I don't remember her spending a lot of time with friends. I mean, occasionally the girls from the office would go out to lunch or something, but she was always, coming home right after work to be home with. Like I said, my dad traveled some, but she was either getting home to be with me or just be at home, or certainly be at home if he was there.
So that trait, I think, is similar between the two of you, like you said, because you have really close friends, but you don't have a ton of them.
Right.
And I've heard you talk about her Girl Scout group. Talk about
Yes,
that a little bit, because that was, I mean, they've been friends
sure.
for a long, long time.
I don't think you could talk about Diane without bringing up the Girl Scouts. There was a group of about a dozen of them that knew each other from, I think, before the time first grade started. They all grew up in the same community, went to some of the same churches, and they were in a Girl Scout group together. And even though mom did not, in my opinion, spend a lot of time outside the home, she wasn't, as an adult, she wasn't active in church or her community or anything like that. At least about twice a year, the Girl Scouts would get together, usually for lunch, sometimes at someone's house. And those were very important. That was a very important group to her. In fact, when mom got older, she developed dementia. I had an 80th birthday party for her, and she was getting quite confused by that time. So I worried a lot about whether I was doing the right thing because, there's always a little risk throwing a surprise party for an 80-year-old, even under the best of circumstances.
Right.
So I had a lot of worries about it. And we had it at the assisted living place where she was. We had a lot of the people from assisted living. We had family friends. I had a few friends I had grown up with. Real mixture of people there in the little community center area. And I had the Girl Scouts. I think at the time there were about 8 of them. A couple of them had already passed away. And I had been praying that this day would go well, but I wasn't sure. And I walked in, she was in front of me, and everybody said surprise. And she looked a little panic stricken. And for about 5 seconds, I thought, oh Lord, what have I done? This is not going to go well. And then her eyes fell on the group of Girl Scouts. She took a deep breath and a big smile on her face, and she starts heading over to the Girl Scouts. And I think that it's always been that way with her. That's just was her home group. Even though she wasn't real outgoing, that was just, they were friends that had been friends from literally cradle to grave and had always been there in each other's lives.
I think that's something that is, I'm sure it's important with men, but it seems like that is such an important thing for women.
Yes.
It was for my mom.
Yes.
She had friends. Now, my mother was a lot more outgoing.
Right.
So mother,
as you are, you were so much more outgoing than I am.
Yeah.
So,
she knew everybody in Neshoba County, and they were, but she had her really close friends also that they did their quilting and stuff together.
Right, I remember.
Other people we talked about in another episode about their sisters, where they would invite their best friends with the sisters, and how important those connections really are that kind of stay with you throughout the ups and downs, and maybe when your spouse is getting on your nerves or whatever, you have that tight-knit group.
Well, one other story I'll tell about the Scouts, my mother was not a big outdoorsy person. She was always dressed nicely. She was a very pretty woman. She took a lot of time to do her hair, to do her makeup, she just didn't go out in public without that. And again, just not real outdoorsy. I was probably about college age, and she came to me one time and asked if she could borrow my sleeping bag and maybe some camping stuff. And I thought, where is my mother, and what have you done with her? Who is this? And the Scouts had rented a couple of cabins up in North Georgia, and they were going for the weekend. And that was very out of character for her. I think she had a good time. She didn't often go off and do something for herself, but that's probably the only group that could have drawn her out to something, and then especially with it being an outdoorsy type of thing.
And they probably did the same things they did when they were little girls.
I'm sure.
They sat around, they told stories, they giggled, they stayed up later,
I'm sure.
So, yeah. Did she change over time with she had to wear the perfect clothes, have the makeup, the hair? Was that something that kind of stayed, or?
That stayed.
Yeah.
Even as her mind went, as she got older, she now sometimes she applied the lipstick a little too thick,
much,
a little too much, but you could tell it was because she still thought that was important.
So, Did she skip some of the Girl Scout badges, like the cooking and
I
the
cannot
outdoor,
imagine the woman got a cooking badge. So
or a camp? Well, she might have gotten the camping one later.
mhm.
You mentioned that, but you do like the outdoors,
I
and you
do.
talked about that she passed on to you um, the love of gardening and
Gardening.
planting.
Hmm.
You have 14
Yeah,
acres.
15. Yeah. That's just,
Tell us a little bit about that, because you have lots of animals out there.
I do. I would say that's my kind of passion in life is taking care of that little hobby farm out there. Um, I share it with a very dear friend of mine, and we have horses and a pig, and we've got many rescued dogs. That's really what's at the heart of what I love to do is dogs. I've got chickens. I plant a little vegetable garden. I spend a good bit of time on my little hobby farm. Now, having grown up in metro Atlanta, that little 15 acres seems like a ranch to
Yeah,
me.
right.
It seems big from where I came from, but in a lot of people's minds, it would be just a big yard.
So, as a little girl growing up in your home,
Hmm.
as an only child, what was your mother like as a mother?
I think she tried. I think that's something as I've looked back, I realized that for the situation she was in, she tried. She wasn't like your mom. She wasn't the PTA mom. She wasn't on all the church committees. She didn't usually offer to bake the cupcakes or serve for Bible school during the summer or anything like that. Children made her nervous, really. She wasn't the Kool-Aid mom. All the kids in the neighborhood didn't come over. Now, I did have that. I had some friends down the street, and they were a lot, their moms were a lot more likely to have all the kids over and things like that. But she was good. She came to most of my school things, and I played basketball not nearly as well as you did, but she came to things like that, and she made an effort.
She was present
She was present. That's a
and
good way to put
attentive,
it. Yes.
but not necessarily overly nurturing.
Right, right. I think I grew up very independent. I know for a lot of kids, things like going off to college is a big thing, and the parents go with them and they cry, and everybody's. I think I packed my car by myself, said, I'll see y'all in a couple weeks, and drove off.
And she
just
said,
for,
okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that was just kind of how we did things.
You said something interesting that surprised me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You said your mother was independent.
Yes.
That's not what I saw because of the relationship with your dad.
Right.
Because she seemed very dependent on him. So
Right.
what's your kind of take on that?
I think I have kind of dissected my mother a little bit over the years, and I understand things a lot more, I think, now that I'm older and having seen what she went through. My dad was an alcoholic. He was a good provider. He always had a job. He any of his spare time, as you know, was usually working real estate or flipping houses. I mean, he was a hard worker, and he and I did not have a wonderful relationship, especially as I got older. But he did instill in me a good work ethic, and he was, in some ways good to me. But his drinking, I think, more than anything else, probably defined our family life. And my mom was the typical codependent wife that constantly felt like her biggest job was to run interference for him in so many regards. And so that really defined who she was. I felt like when I was growing up, I saw her as kind of weak. I was like, she just does whatever dad says, or she just folds whenever, I had high aspirations to go to college and become something professional. And maybe I looked at what she did and thought, well, you didn't really make any huge contributions to, I don't want that to sound bad, but I don't know that I looked at it as a route I wanted to go. And then I look back and realize a lot of the strength I think I have comes more from her than from my dad. I've always felt like I'm pretty strong, and I'm very stubborn. I always say that my best and worst qualities are the fact I'm stubborn. I think, I can be irritating as as the day is long to work with, but also I feel like the things I've accomplished in my life are not necessarily because I'm incredibly smart or because of any great talent, but just the fact that I don't give up, and I'm very stubborn. I think I'm stubborn believing in people and everything else, but I think I got that from Mom more than Dad, and I think that was a big realization as I got older.
When did you come to that realization? Because I remember you saying, my mom doesn't even know how to put gas in the car.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when did that happen that you started seeing your mother in a different way than you had when you were growing up?
I would say probably not really even. Well, I guess it began. My dad got very sick. Pancreatitis, was in the hospital for almost an entire year. And my mother, who couldn't put gas in the car, who I felt like, she had stayed alone a lot as he traveled, but he was always coming home to fix something, or, I just wondered about her life skills. And that year that he was in the hospital, I think at first she saw her world crumbling, and then after a week or so, and she realized this was going to be more of a marathon than a sprint, she sucked it up and went back to work. She'd work every day. Then she'd go to the hospital and sit with him for about 2 hours. She'd go home and rest and get up and do it again. And I think I was in vet school at the time, so I came home as much as I could on the weekends, but I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. And I think I started to kind of see then. I was like, dang, she's kind of tougher than I ever gave her credit for. And then, I don't know that was a total epiphany, though, at that point. I think it was, probably even after my dad died later in her life that I really looked back and thought, she was the stronger one of the two of them.
And that really showed up, because when you were talking about the sickness, that's not when your dad died.
No, he did not.
He rallied.
And then he
later,
died about 10 or 11 years ago. He died in 2015, I guess.
Did you see her change after that? Because I think a lot of times women, maybe there is a codependency, or sometimes I wonder if women don't do stuff because they just want the man to think that they don't know. Here, honey, you do this. It makes you feel good about yourself. So how did she changed after your father?
She changed a lot. And our relationship changed a lot. It had always kind of been stressful. I feel like there were times, I know I talked to you at times back then when, you said you got to realize she's got to live with him on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of times she chose whatever was the path of least resistance, whatever it took to keep him happy, keep peaceful, even if it didn't really meet my needs or my expectations at the time. But I think it changed a lot when he passed away. She had a pretty quick, in less than a year after he passed away, she had a health scare. She ended up in the hospital after a surgery went wrong, and she just about died. In fact, she a few times said she saw Dad standing right outside the hospital window, and I thought, well, there she goes, But she ended up going, through a physical rehab, physical therapy, and went to an independent living. It was a retirement community, but was in an independent side, and she really blossomed there. She made friends. She, I think, always missed Dad because despite the fact that he could be a royal pain, he was good to her. They loved each other. I've heard people remark they might be the only two people that would have put up with, either of them. And I said several times, my mother deserves her angel wings for living with my dad for 51 years, I think. But that's a whole other story. But she went to the independent living side of a retirement facility and really she made, very typical the way I would probably be, she made a couple of very good friends, and she sat with them at dinner and still kept to herself a lot. She did a lot of, reading and word search, and she liked her coloring books and things like that. But she was still able to drive, and she went to Belk and went to the grocery store and things like that. So she settled into that pretty well. But I'll tell you something that really changed the whole thing was COVID. They were in lockdown for almost an entire year, and I worried a lot about her. I had things delivered via Amazon. The building she was in, they took incredibly good care of them. They made sure they, had whatever they needed. And Mom made a lot of friends during lockdown. They were just forced in there together. I used to call her and could usually predictably tell when she would be in her apartment. I knew she'd be at, breakfast or dinner, but, the normal thing before COVID was she would be by herself for the afternoon or something like that. Well, then it got where I would call and she wouldn't be there. Well, she'd call me back later and say, sorry, we were bowling in the hallway. Or we had a...
Of course you were.
Yeah, we had a cornhole tournament out in the lobby. Or they had a singer or some type of musical entertainment that came in for the afternoon, and she went to all of these and just became a real participant in it. Now I also think her mind was starting that gentle slide.
I was going to say, was that part of a personality change that happened with, or was it just more freedom or?
Yeah, it's more freedom after Dad died. I think by the time they were out after COVID, though, she was probably starting to have a little personality change from.
Yeah, my dad's personality changed. He had Alzheimer's, and he was like that. He didn't like people. He had his very few people, and he was funny and enjoyed them, but he was not a people person at all. And when he was in the nursing home, he loved for people to come by and see him. They would when they were doing tours of the nursing home, they would take people to my dad's room
Mr.
because
Don.
he was so hospitable, and I'm like really?
Where's my dad?
Yeah. So I think that does happen sometimes.
I was incredibly blessed in that my mother, for the most part, as she progressed through dementia, she was very sweet. Now she got toward the end, got anxious and that side of it that I think a lot of people don't see until they actually live through it. But she had a lot of anxiety toward the end. But she was pretty sweet and mostly easy to deal with.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to put yourself in your mother's place for a minute. If she were sitting here and I said, how did your relationship with Diana change over time?
That's a good question.
What would she say? Do you think it would parallel? Do you think it would be like, well, I was doing the best I could with the, my family, my spouse, trying to make that work? What do you think she might?
I'm not sure if she would realize quite the magnitude of time she, I think, chose my dad over me. I think she would think she had done the best she could. But yeah, I definitely think she would have seen that at times she had to try to do whatever was going to keep the peace with him and let me be, like I said,
you could take care of yourself.
I could.
Yeah.
I look back and I think a lot of people look back on their childhood and they have things that they think damaged them and some people deal with horrible things that I can't even imagine. But, for the most part, a lot of times those things just kind of make you who you are, and you can choose to make those good things. And I think they gave me a lot of freedom and a lot of. I was an only child, but I wasn't just handed things left and right. Like I said, they instilled a very good work ethic, I think, in me. But I did grow up with money to go to college and opportunities that might not have had there been 6 children or something like that. So I understand that.
We've talked about Orme. Your father also had a very interesting mother. What was your mother's relationship with her?
I think she just tried to keep the peace and tried not to get too involved. I think my dad's mother could have been a little overbearing with stuff. I think it was probably a typical kind of relationship. I know when I was small, she would get aggravated because they would want her in-laws would want to pop down at 8 o'clock at night and see the baby. Well, the baby was asleep, and my mother, I'm sure, was exhausted, and they didn't understand why we don't just wake the baby up.
We're
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And they were community leaders in Smyrna.
They were. My grandfather was big in the Civitans and historical society and things like that. So I think they could be kind of irritating. I don't think she had a particularly adversarial relationship. I think it was just
there.
Yeah, just there.
You've talked a little bit about some of the ways that you're like your mother. If you're looking now at, this is what I've inherited from her, and not the financial stuff or whatever, but this is what I carry forward that she gave to me, what would that look like?
Like I said, probably my stubbornness. She was someone who could, I think, look at a situation and not let it get her too bogged down. She just figured out a way to do it. I think just my relationship with her, looking back, and one of the things I can say, if I can go back just a minute to after my dad died and then she got sick, I feel like immediately things changed a bit for me in that I was sort of in a caretaker position, not necessarily daily, not necessarily, but her ability to look after herself changed sort of suddenly because of the illness. And I just became a little more of a, caretaker from a distance. I had to do a lot of that from over here. But, I like I said, I see that she was usually able to, whatever it was, she'd just overcome it. She fell one time. This was after she had, come through the other part, and she was getting older then. And I think a lot of people thought, well, this will just be the thing that does her in. And she had shoulder surgery, and she had, she was in her late 70s, almost 80. And she went to rehab. This was a second time through rehab for her. And I think a lot of people would have given up, and she just kept going. So I think that stubbornness, I think in looking at my relationship with her and probably some other relationships in my life, it took me a long time to realize this, but something I've learned is that sometimes just because people aren't doing exactly what you think they should or helping you in a way you think that they should be doing, sometimes they're doing the absolute best they can for that point in time. And I do look back at what all she dealt with and think, well, she wasn't the PTA mom, she wasn't the Kool-Aid mom, but she was, I think, in many cases doing the best that she can.
I think in talking to women about their mothers, and we're talking about mothers who have passed away, I think there becomes that realization as you go through the stages of your life that you're looking back that they went through.
Right.
And,
right.
At 40 or 50 or 60, you can understand better where they were at 40 or 50 or 60 that just you couldn't.
Right.
When you were a child.
I often think about, there was only 21 years between us, which made her a little bit of a younger mother. And so there are a lot of times in my life, I think back, I'm like, wow, my mom was, this age when this happened.
She was still growing up in a way,
right.
And having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
You have, you don't have children, but you have a lot of students that you work with that are very special to you. Mm-hmm. You've been at the university for
25 years.
So there's been a lot of young people come through over that time. You've got other children and young people that are important to you and are important in your life. So what are you passing down? Is there some advice that your mother gave you that you're passing down, or is there just what you learned through the years with her and through the transitions in her life that you are now passing that on, passing her legacy on and your
Right.
legacy on as well.
Right. I can't think of too many things she said. She wasn't the type of person that sat down and had a deep, meaningful conversation or anything. But
There's not a lot of
no,
Diane
no,
quotes.
there's
that-
really not.
Yeah.
There's not quotes or not things that I remember her saying so much. But I think she passed on to me to, a certain strength. I guess that's, I've said that. And looking at being open to people having, doing the best that they can where they are. Also, just that it's never too late to have a good relationship with your mother. Like I said, after Dad died, we had a very different type of relationship. Probably one thing that as I was going through, the ideas before doing this session, I was trying to think of things that I had or found after she died. And she wasn't always somebody to say, I'm proud of you. As she got older and got to be that little old lady, you could tell she lit up when I came to visit her. She'd say, I've been looking for that little red truck all morning, waiting for me to drive over from Mississippi. But I did find a card, and it was obviously for a daughter, and so I'm the only one she had that I know of. And said something on the front about, those my favorite, those 3 little words or whatever, and he opened it up, and the 3 words were, "That's my daughter." And that really hit me hard when, because I think I could see that some in her, especially as she got older, that she was proud of me and pleased. She just became a lot less judgmental about, anything in my life. And now she still would tell me if I was wearing the wrong color or something like that. You could, did you mean to do your hair like that? Things like that. But that was a big thing. She never got around to sending that card, but I do feel like she got that card with the intention of giving it to me.
That's neat. Yeah, I'm that way. I'm good at buying cards. So
well,
I'm
her
thinking
mind
about
was
them at that
going-
moment. Well,
yeah,
I don't know, my mind may
think
be
she
going
just
to.
stuck it somewhere.
So with that, are there some things that you saw that maybe you learned that she was proud of you? She really was. Maybe she didn't tell you. She probably told other people. I mean, that's
Right.
one of the things you see also, that she's telling everybody
Sure.
else about her daughter, but she
Yeah.
never tells you.
Oh, yeah.
Has that informed how you relate to other people, with whether it's students or young people or whatever, and how you've seen the relationship that you have with her? Has that affected other relationships that you have, or with your students or anybody?
Well, I feel like it has. One thing I think I try to really tell my students when they ask, when we're having some of these talking sessions, not just, I often tell them they're much better than they think they are. I want them to be confident. And these are young adults that are going through veterinary school, which is very difficult. And a lot of times their confidence is just usually a little lacking. And in most cases, like you're better than you think you are. And also you have us to fall back on, to call if you need that kind of, mostly in a professional way, but sometimes in a little bit of a motherly way, if you've got this. And I feel like maybe my mother had that with me, but not always when I was younger. I think she, in her mind, successful would have been me getting married and having a family. And I think she always, she made me feel like that was a shortcoming rather than, but I think she was proud of my professional life.
We had a symposium a few weeks ago, and we had a student panel. And one of the things that they said, because they were talking to faculty, this was a faculty training, and they said, don't call your students kids. Because they're not kids.
Yeah.
Now, they're young adults, but they're new at it. they're learning how to be adults. And I think that influence on those young people, that they're not children anymore. They're not
Right.
kids. They really are adults, but they don't know how to be an adult yet.
Yeah.
And in the vet school, they're a little bit older than that, but still there's a lot that they're learning how to do. And I mean, they're in medical school basically. So
Right.
it's a lot of responsibility.
They're usually incredibly smart. They're very motivated, but they're having to learn how to do life. And sometimes that's where, sometimes I get a chance to help with that.
So as we wrap up, is there anything that surprised you when you look back, that surprises you about your mother, or that you think, you know what, I didn't realize that at the time?
The one thing that comes to my mind, she was very witty. I don't think I would have thought that at all. And maybe it just came out so much more as she got older and
Loosened up a little bit.
Loosened up, got out from under the influence of my dad. Maybe, again, she was very proper. She always, did her hair just right. And I'm sure there was she had a certain hold on, saying things too quickly or whatever. But as her mind started to slip, I guess that little governor was gone now. And she was a very witty person. I did not inherit that. I think I have a good sense of humor, but I am not witty. But she would just haul off with something that was usually kind. She wasn't just but it was she was pretty quick-witted.
So have you ever talked to her Girl Scout friends about her? Did you have a chance to do that after she passed away?
Bit.
Or does it be interesting to see how they described her?
Right.
Which
right.
probably very different
than
a daughter.
Sure. Yeah. I've never spent a lot of time. There's one was her best friend growing up, Dot. And I've talked with her just a little bit, but not so much. But she would say how reserved Mom was and things like that. Just, we'd love for your mom to come to that, but I'm sure she won't. Those type of things. Mom was very, again, into appearances. And that time when she was really, really sick in the hospital, she had said she did not want anybody to come in there and visit her, because mainly that she didn't want them to see her with her makeup off and her hair. And I called Dot, though, and I said, I think you should come, because we really didn't think she was going to live through that. That's when she was waving at Dad outside the hospital window and all that. So I said, I don't really care what she says. I think Dot should come be. And she did. She came and visited. But that was about 10 years before Mom actually passed away. So she came through that one. But yeah, she was very witty. So I only assumed maybe as a child she was a little more that way, but I never saw that until she got older.
Well, probably during the time that you're raising children, there's not a lot of witty
There's
things
not a
you're
lot.
thinking about, right?
No.
You're just trying to make it through from one day to the next.
Right.
Well, thank you for being here. I think this has been a great conversation. And I
thank
appreciate
you.
you sharing your story and your mom's story.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this. This, I hope, is going to reach a lot of people. All these programs that you're doing, the continued podcast and stuff. I think it's a really great idea, and you're an excellent person to be doing that.
Well, the interesting thing you've said, and I think so far everybody I've talked to, they've said, well, I don't, my story, it's kind of boring. I don't know. But I think there's so many things in each story that people can connect to or go, yeah, my mom was like that too. Or maybe even people whose mother's still around, that they can say, oh, maybe they get some insight even to the relationship as it is right now. So I'm hoping that it will resonate. So thank you also, listeners, for joining us on this episode of A Daughter's Inheritance. I hope something in this conversation stays with you. Maybe it's comfort or connection, recognition of maybe a similar story that you have with your own mother, and, maybe a laugh or two here and there. If it did resonate with you, please follow the show so you'll never miss the next daughter's story. And if you have an inheritance story of your own, I'd love to hear it. Until then, in the words of my mother, be patient, be kind, and be fair.